So this is because yes, other sectors grew. That is like Asad Awan basically said this and very rightly said that other sectors have uh, have grown over the years. But like if this was happened, like if this was really true, like that other sectors actually are contributing at the place of the agriculture sector, it would have been very fine, it would have been very good. But somehow that actually happened because of the inefficiencies in the agriculture sector. If the shift would have come from the agriculture sector to the industrial sector, like again, if you have studied development economics and you have studied Lewis model of development, does anybody remember the Lewis model of development? Does anybody remember the Lewis model of development? So if you recall the Lewis model of Gigi. Yes.
No, I was.
Yes, Varisha, please.
No, sir, I was saying that I don't think that we've done it.
All right. Okay. All right. So Varisha, actually, like, I would recall you, perhaps you must have done this in your development theories. Sometimes you mix it with other kind of things. So Lewis basically supported this, that like, that over the time we should move people from the agriculture sector to the industrial sector. Because that can grow, that can help us grow, because the people, majority of the people who live in the rural areas are not as productive as they can become if they are moved from the agriculture sector, rural sectors to urban sectors. And that was the model he suggested, because he said like, that if you do this, you can always improve the productivity of industrial sector, which actually are having the shortage of the people actually. And this agriculture sector have got the majority of the people actually living there and majority of the people contributing into this. So that is what something was the was the case. In current period, it is hovering around the 20%, but this particular model has not worked in Pakistan, because whatever people were moved from the agriculture sector to the urban sectors, they became even more burden for the society, because they were not able to contribute, because that urban centers could not develop themselves as they should have developed over the years in Pakistan. So the agriculture, the share of agriculture sector in total employment also fell from 65%. 65% people were employed in 1950-51 in the agriculture sector to around 47.5% in 1996. Now, why Pakistan's agriculture sector has not been able to perform? If the transition would have taken place from the agricultural sector's dependence to the industrial sector, or industrial sector from the industrial sector to the services sector, that would have been very fine for the country. But why Pakistan was not growing? There were some other reasons. It was not happening that the that this particular kind of agriculture sector was reducing its share and other sectors were increasing its shares. What was happening that this particular sectors were actually losing their shares because of their inefficiencies. Like say, for example, here basically we actually had got less introduction of technology. Whatever technology came, they came to the people who were very much illiterate, untrained, and unskilled. So whatever technology was transferred to Pakistan in the agriculture sector has not been able to give benefit to the people because they were not able to use it. And similarly, the limited adoption of progressive farming techniques. There are different kinds of techniques, like in which you just always use your lands and properties and lands effectively, and you improve your techniques over the years. We were not able to progress into this. Problems with quality, quantity, and timeliness of the input supply. Generally, people are not able to get loans at the right time when they actually need that loans, agricultural loans to grow their crops. And limited investments in infrastructure, like in the time of Nawaz Sharif, when these motorways were being built up and this GT road was being improved. The main objective of that particular plan was to connect small urban rural sectors, or urban small rural villages and rural uh, towns to the centers, to the main cities. So that was a good initiative in that term, in that way, because that somehow has given a kind of, uh, passage for these all people to take their outputs from their production areas to the main markets, which they generally used to sell to the uh, middlemen, and they basically somehow were able to get it. But this infrastructure still is not enough, and the people basically in the agriculture sector are not being able to utilize it properly and get the benefit of it. There were some other restrictions of the, say for example, the provincial, whatever is produced in the Sindh province, it can be only sold to the other provinces when these provincial governments allow. So that basically sometimes can also create trouble, because some provinces which produce more and the other provinces which produce less, if they need it, they have to have a kind of restrictions. They face restrictions for the interprovincial transfer of this all foods. There have been consistent pest and livestock diseases problems in Pakistan. We have not been able to educate our the farmers, for dealing with these all kinds of problems. Whenever they are at the first place, they don't have got access to pesticides and other kind of treatments for their crops, but pesticides and other kind of weedicides effectively for their agriculture sector. And the people basically face a lot of trouble. There are very few formal sources for the agricultural loan for the farmers. Generally, they have to rely on non-traditional or shadow banking systems, and these shadow banking systems are so cruel, in the sense they charge a lot of money, a lot of interest on them, and but they pay what they actually have got very strong conditions with the loans as well associated. So these people suffer once a farmer takes loan from these all money sharks or these all money lenders. He or she gets stuck with that money, and he actually has to lose a lot of his land and output just because of the small loan that he or she has taken. So there is a need of the government to actually come into play and provide cheap and timely loans to these people, so that they don't have to rely on these money lenders who basically are so predators, and they basically are they eat up all their lands for small loans which they give to them. Processing and lack of agricultural specific financing, that's what basically is we are talking about. Okay, so the shrinking number of farmers makes organizing an interesting group easier. Farmers use organizations to develop it. There should be a need for development of the agricultural policy. Like we don't have got other policies. Similarly, we don't have got a very good agricultural pricing policy. The agricultural pricing policy, you must have heard about the support prices. Does anybody know about the support prices? What do we mean by support prices in agriculture sector? Does anybody know about the support prices which are given to the farmers?
Sir, basically, some farming goods are technically supposed to be very cheap, but those price levels aren't supportive to farmers. So government sets up prices, like for example, in price ceilings, and what happens is the price is set at a certain level which benefits those farmers.
Very true. Yes, like that is something, like that. Say, for example, that if the market price of wheat is, say, for example, 10 rupees per kilo, the government sets above it, that so that it would benefit the people in the sense, that they actually, they say, for example, if the price of that particular crop should be 10 rupees kilo, the government sets it as 12 rupees kilos or 15 rupees kilo. That actually helps farmers to get better incomes and get better reward for their services. And these support prices are also given to the farmers for those crops which people do not grow because of higher cost and low price. Like, say, for example, some of the crops are very expensive to grow, but whatever they fetch to the farmer is very small. They are sold at very low price in the market. So generally, people don't go towards the production of those kind of crops. The government incentivizes them that if you produce those crops, we will be supporting you, and we will give you the support price This support price has got its own mechanisms because the support price generally, the government sets a price higher than the market price. But again, the benefit of that support price does not go to the poorest of the poor. Why it doesn't go to the poorest of the poor? What do you think?
Sir, can you repeat?
So although the government sets support prices for so many crops, but that also does not benefit in Pakistan to the poorest farmers. Do you
So
know why?
basically, I think the reason for this is because we have a feudal lord system, and the farmers usually work for feudal lords. And what happens is the feudal lords end up taking all the crops and selling them to the markets, and so the support prices end up benefiting those feudal lords in the end.
Yeah, that is to some extent very, very correct, actually, as he has mentioned. And generally, what happens that at a support price, government buys these crops from the people, and generally they buy crops from the rich farmers because they basically are generally in the assemblies as well. They are basically, in the governments, they have got linkages with all government agencies. So they are able to sell, before the small farmer sells to the government that all crop at that particular price which government has sets for the poor. So generally the benefit again goes to the top rich farmers or top rich feudals or landlords who basically have got connections in the governments or who has got connections in bureaucracy or other kind of places. So they get the benefit of that as well. So it is also not benefiting to the uh, to the farmers. This support price has got its own cons as well. It has got its own negative side. Sometimes when government supports too much some crop, so many farmers start producing them. So the price supports cause larger production and smaller consumption sometimes, and consumers buy less of that good. So this result in overproduction at the support price. So the prices in the market goes down, but the government buys it, and again they give the subsidy. So the government suffers twice for this particular kind of a situation, because first of all they give more price for the products which have a lower value, and then they give subsidy on them because, like, say for example, if they are being sold at lower prices, they basically have to sell them at lower prices than the price they have bought it on. So they basically suffer twice in this particular kind of a situation. So the only way for the price support agency to get rid of its inventories is to use export subsidies to make them cheap enough that farmers will buy them, and that also benefits to the big exporters. That also happened in the agriculture sector. So in the sugar sector, that the permission of exports were given to the rich growers, and then again they were also allowed to import at subsidized rates, and again the government suffered billions of rupees, and these people pocketed a lot of money during these all times. But this agricultural pricing policy has got its own significance. First of all, it removes uncertainty for the farmer. Like, say for example, if I am a grower, if I am a farmer and I'm growing certain crop, and if I know, like say for example, if I don't know what price I'm going to get for that particular crop at the end of the day, I will be very much uncertain because I won't know that how basically things are basically going to be in the future. Will I be able to get enough money or not? So that basically increases the agricultural production as well. There is a lag between agriculture prices and other prices because, of course, the agriculture is grown and then they actually transform into other products. There is a lag between them. So somehow during that time, things basically match up. Lack of storage facilities. People don't have got storage facilities. Stabilize the tempo of economic growth. Income disparities. They help you remove the income disparities, and they also improve the standard of living of the poor people. Another very important issue with the agricultural sector of Pakistan is, and this is also the issue of so many, in so many countries with the agriculture sector, the agricultural finance. How much money, like say for example, these all farmers require loans at the time of when they sow their seeds or when they cut their crops. They need loans, they need money to actually exercise these, to just perform those all exercises. So according to one estimate, the demand for smallholder agriculture finance is around $450. You can convert them into Pakistani rupees. Without access to credit, most smallholders are restricted to farming practices that results in low levels of productivity. So the agricultural finance should be available. But the problem with again this agriculture sector is that majority of the financing does not come from the formal sector. Generally, the majority of the financing comes from the informal sector. So in Pakistan also, formal sources of agricultural finance are not available. New banks are coming up. There are so many agricultural banks. There are so many other kind of banks. So if you look at the second point here, farm surveys often show that less than 1 in 10 smallholders farmers are eligible for a commercial loan from a bank or other financial organizations, because the banks basically only give to the already rich people. They don't give loan to such people who don't have got any collateral to offer, who don't have got any kind of securities to give, or who don't have got any social standings. So the banks generally rely on these to safeguard its own money. So that basically makes them ineligible, or they makes them unable to get loans from those all commercial banks. So due to its inherent risky nature, the availability of formal financial services dedicated to the needs of small farmers is limited. And also whatever the loans are given to these farmers depend on that how good crop they get and how much they earn from those crops. Sometimes and all the times they are so vulnerable to the environmental changes, vulnerable to the seasons, vulnerable to the weather conditions. So generally the governments or generally the banks lose money on this agricultural financing if this basically causes any kind of trouble. So there is so much reluctance in the banks to give loan to these all poor people. So there are very high risks. The banks are not generally interested in them, and especially women and young people many who do not have formal ownership of lands cannot get the loans from these banks. Now, if you look at the available sources for agricultural finance, although there have been a number of initiatives government and private sector in Pakistan has taken, historically majority of the people have borrowed from non-institutional sources. Non-institutional sources means informal sources, like from the land, from the money lenders, from the money sharks, and they basically have been so cruel and they have been so unfair with the treatment of their borrowers. So in 1972-73, you will be amazed to look at these numbers. In 1972-73, around 90% borrowing in the agriculture sector was happening from the informal sector, from the shadow banking. And the survey of 1985 showed that it declined to around 68%, but still, that was huge. This is another study, a study of informal finance market in Pakistan by Adnan Qadir. This informal finance markets have a long history in Pakistan, and this sector basically has got a lot of problems. Informal markets exist not because of limited supply of credit from the formal finance markets. Rather, they also have competitive advantage in some market segments. It's easy to get loans from them. It is easy to access them, and formal banking systems are very difficult to access, and there are some kind of a problem with the availability. Now, look at this table given in this particular study. So, if you look at the the division of the loans from the formal and informal sectors, institutional sources were able to give just 9.8% of the loans, whereas non-institutional sources like informal sources were actually 91% of the credit to the farmer was coming from the non-institutional sources or informal sectors, and that reduced to 60% in 1985, 41% in again another study of 1985, and in 1990 it fell to it rose to around 76.4%. And then it it was hovering around 78%. So this is something that although that has fallen, but again still more than 3/4 of the financing coming from the informal sector. And this informal sector is not good in a way like that it cannot it does not give loans at subsidized rates, and they don't treat these all people very well. All right, we call it a day here.